don't remember asking you a goddamn thing.
Hello, Internet. Welcome back to the podcast that no one asked for. My name is Guy, and no one asked for this. Today, we have a special guest host, our returning movie megamind, Wil P. How are you today, Will?
I am good. Thanks for having me, Guy.
Today, we're going to be discussing the 92nd Academy Awards, taking place on, I think, February 9th. Podcasts that talk about movie nominations and awards and all that shit are a dime a dozen, and we're basically going to be following the same general format that most of them do. We will only be discussing the Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor, Best Supporting Actress, Best Director, and Best Picture. One slightly different thing for our podcast is that we will be doing limited fantasy booking. There's always everyone's opinion on who got snubbed and who didn't, but for our cases, we're going to limit ourselves to only being able to replace one nominee, and we will not be voting for that nominee. It's just kind of a ceremonial thing that we'll be granting them the "I wish this person had been nominated" title, fantasy booking, as it were. So, Will, you ready to get into this?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
So we're going to start off with the Best Actor category. And the nominees for Best Actor are Antonio Banderas for Pain and Glory, Leonardo DiCaprio for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Adam Driver for Marriage Story, Joaquin Phoenix, Joker, and Jonathan Pryce for The Two Popes. First up, is there any fantasy booking you want to do for Best Actor? Anyone you would replace?
Honestly, no. I think this was a pretty solid lineup, surprisingly. And I actually didn't have too many quarrels with who they either added or did not add. The people that maybe could have made it in. I thought maybe Just Mercy came out a little too late. I knew people probably wouldn't have time to see it. So there are a couple, but for this, that,
myself
and the other,
included.
For this, that, and the other, I guess in my mind it made sense why some of them didn't get added. So I didn't actually have too many issues with Best Actor.
And I mostly agree with you. The only one I would fantasy book is I'd put Eddie Murphy in for Dolomite and probably replace Antonio Banderas. Props to Eddie Murphy. But my vote would be for Joaquin Phoenix. How about you?
Yeah, Joaquin. It's an unstoppable. Not to be cheesy with the Joker line, but it's when an unstoppable force meets an unmovable object. You know, Joaquin, I think he's just destined this year. And I think his performance, we talked about it in a past podcast, warrants it. It's like I said in the last cast, he does a lot of heavy lifting and he does it well, so makes sense.
Moving on to the next category, it's going to be Best Actress. And your nominees are Cynthia Erivo for Harriet, Scarlett Johansson for Marriage Story, Saoirse Ronan for Little Women, I hope I'm saying that right, Charlize Theron for Bombshell, and Renee Zellweger in Judy. I am hopefully uneducated because I haven't seen a number of these films, so I do not have a vote or any fantasy booking for this. How about you?
Yeah, Awkwafina. I actually saw The Farewell. She was fantastic in it. I thought at least the nomination was appropriate. I honestly think, because what's interesting about the timing of this podcast is I will most likely see Judy by the time the awards air. So by then I'll have a much better opinion, but I think regardless from what I've heard, people that I trust as far as their opinions and critiques when it comes to films, on top of what I'm hearing from general critics, Awkwafina would have probably given her the best run for her money. I think the omission of her, I think, is just, it's obviously the greater issue of inclusivity with the Academy, which is a whole other topic, but in this case, I think that she would have given the best run, and I actually saw the movie. I thought she was great, so I was a little bummed that she didn't get at least a nomination for it.
Yeah, if I was going to put anyone, it would be Lupita Nyong'o for Us. But I don't know who I would take out because I haven't seen the movies.
Yeah, I mean, and then so as far as who would I replace, I think that was the second part of it. Who I probably would replace is probably going to be Saoirse Ronan. Because I actually, from what I'm hearing about Little Women, she's kind of played the role before. Similar to the role she played in, what was the movie, Brooklyn, way back. I think she also got nominated for that. So, I don't know. I feel like there's more bandwidth to it. But as far as who's gotten nominated, I think Renee Zellweger is going to win just because of how it's fallen. I think the close second is going to be Scarlett Johansson.
Makes sense. I can't disagree with you because I don't know enough. I did love Scarlett Johansson's performance, but then again, Nothing to compare it against. Next category. Best Supporting Actor. And the nominees are Tom Hanks, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Anthony Hopkins, The Two Popes. Al Pacino, The Irishman. And Joe Pesci for The Irishman. And finally, Brad Pitt for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Fantasy booking. I would replace Hopkins with Song Kang-ho from Parasite.
You took the words out of my mouth. I the father in Parasite, and I always his name kind of is escaping, but I think that's him. I thought the same thing. I said I don't understand how he didn't get a nom. It's interesting because the guy is essentially acting in another language, but he wears his emotions so well on his sleeve. I just figured it just made sense. Obviously, I think it's Brad Pitt's year. I think he did well in playing that role in Once Upon a Time, and I think we had this talk about the kind of running joke of him being a big movie star playing essentially a movie star's backup. It just works so well, and the enigma that is Brad Pitt. And I think we talked about the fact that part of it is the fact that he's just so good looking as an actor. He's actually underrated for how good of an actor he really is. He's been putting out a lot of good stuff over the last 4 or 5 years between Fury and a couple other movies he's had. But in any case, back to the subject, I think he's going to win it. I wouldn't replace anybody in this, I would replace, the father with Anthony Hopkins, same substitution. Actually, no, I take that back, I'm sorry. Joe Pesci, because I thought Joe Pesci, the quiet man role, I was like, I didn't get too much out of that. I thought Al Pacino and De Niro kind of carried that movie. I would have probably subbed Joe Pesci out, for the father, in Parasite, and then kept the rest the same. I think Brad Pitt still would win it, but it would have been nice to give him the nomination, because I thought that guy was fantastic.
Yeah, is your vote for Brad?
Yeah, and my vote, I think Brad's going to win, and I vote for Brad, because, he was very good. I think he actually carried that movie better than Leo did, which I think was the point. I think he was the lead in that movie more than Leo was, but I think just by the definition of a supporting actor, he falls into this category, which is good, because he has a better chance of winning in this category. But I think we both can agree he did more of the lifting in that movie, acting-wise, and carrying it than I think even Leo, I think anyone else in that movie, for sure.
Yeah, the surprising part of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood for me, I'm also voting for Brad, is usually in the Quentin Tarantino movie, it's either you get to say cool shit or you get to do cool shit. And I don't think particularly that until the end of the movie, Brad didn't really do anything cool, because the Bruce Lee scene was in his head. We don't know how that actually played out in real life. And he was just kind of sidekicking his way through his relationship with I don't forget his name, but Leonardo DiCaprio.
I think it's also a testament to, I think, Quentin in general, how much he values the supporting cast role, how much he values supporting actor, especially male actor, the way he's, between obviously Christoph Waltz winning 2 with him, the Jules character, which was technically a supporting character in Pulp Fiction, but we obviously know how significant he was. And this one, I was like, I think this is classic Tarantino, with the way that he definitely puts a lot of pressure on that supporting actor role, and it shows, because it's about literally this is what out of the last 5 films, there's a good chance he's about to have a third best supporting actor win in his last 5. So it's clear that he emphasizes that role, and it's one of those things where I always now check whenever Tarantino's casting. People are like, oh, he's in the movie, and I'm like, well, who's the second lead? I always ask that now, because I'm like, who's the second lead in that movie? Because whoever the second lead is, they're probably going to have about an hour's worth of dialogue by themselves.
And the idea of Leo being the star who is on screen, but if you met them in real life, he's a stuttering, kind of corny dude, and Brad is underspoken and just exudes coolness, but he's not a movie star. He's just a good-looking guy doing stunts in LA who might have murdered his wife. And so to be able to get everything you get from that character without him actually saying anything cool, that's a lot. And vote for Brad.
Agreed.
And I mean, an advantage that Tarantino has over some other directors, the majority of directors, is he can kind of pick whoever he wants. He can just send a text message, you want to be on my next project, with no script, and people are like, yeah.
people clear their schedules for him, and it's one of those things where there isn't an actor like you said. Literally, he could probably call Matt Damon tomorrow and say, and Matt wouldn't need to hear the whole pitch. He'd say, yeah, absolutely, I'm in. That is, to your point, rarefied atmosphere that he operates in this town.
Next up, we are going to discuss the Best Supporting Actress. The nominees are Kathy Bates for Richard Jewell, Laura Dern for In Marriage Story, Scarlett Johansson once again for Jojo Rabbit, Florence Pugh for Little Women, and Margot Robbie for Bombshell. Do you have any fantasy booking for this category?
Yeah, so I would have, and it's an obvious one. I would have put J-Lo in this. And I think I would have taken out Margot pretty quickly. I think that the Academy sometimes forgets that part of their job isn't just to celebrate what they think is good, but to celebrate achievement. You know, why does Lord of the Rings win 11 Oscars? Is it because the movie was just so ridiculously good that, no, it's well made, but because it broke new ground? Why does the Titanic win 11 Oscars? Why does Avatar? Because it breaks ground, and part of the Academy's job is a celebration of film and the celebration of progress within the industry. And I think when somebody does as much growth in a role as J-Lo does, which is something I didn't think I'd ever say, you have to acknowledge it, especially when only a few years back they gave Sly Stallone a nominee for Creed, a role which not only has he already done before, but he clearly evolved that role as the older Rocky now, right? And that was something that made sense to kind of acknowledge. I'm shocked they just were completely kind of noses up to J-Lo in this case, especially considering that Margot's role, in my opinion, is something she's also played before. So
I think that I have the same exact pick for you as you. Hustlers and J-Lo basically were a victim of when the movie came out. Essentially, they just got forgotten in the deluge that comes in October, November, December.
Yeah, unfortunately, the strategy behind the Oscar season, to your point, plays a big role. Part of why I think Spielberg hasn't won one in 20 years, you and I both know, is because he refuses to campaign. That's not something he does. Even though we know there have been years when he clearly was better than a lot of other directors out there. So I'll give you that, and maybe that was part of it. But I will just say, while I thought Laura Dern, I think she's the front runner just based off of SAG. While I think that she is great in that role, if you compare what she had to do in that role to what J-Lo had to do in Hustlers, it just, I don't get how not only does she come out on top of J-Lo, but how does J-Lo not even get the nom? Like, it was one of the more shocking snubs to me, and I'm like, if anything, they'll give her a pity nomination. They didn't give her anything, which kind of really, really bothered me. So, that's a whole other thing, but I would have, just to your point, fantasy, I would have put in J-Lo, I would have taken out Margot, I probably would have put her, and then here's the funny thing, though, if we're looking at these other four remaining the same, I still think the best supporting actress, to me, I think Scarlett Johansson did a bit better in Jojo Rabbit. I think, honestly, it should have been between her and J-Lo this year, but, that's just me. If we're talking about, well, what did it require to pull off that role versus this role? I love Laura Dern, but I feel like she's done similar roles.
Piggybacking off what you just said, my vote goes to ScarJo and JoJo. That movie, she's the heart and soul of it. She's the only real person in the movie living in the real world, and the rest of the people are kind of like have some weird fantasy reality they escape to, or they're living in the fantasy reality of Nazi Germany as a place that should exist. And she also has such a sweet relationship with her son. And I mean, even her relationship with the girl that she was hiding, there's so much. And to put you on the spot, do you think JoJo's father is Jewish? It was my first question when I left the theater.
I think so. Honestly, I did. Like, when I was watching it, I was like, I think he is. But I mean,
they never answer that question.
Yeah, they never really go into it in retrospect. It's something I didn't think about too much because I literally was just focused on, like, oh my God, this was a great adaptation. And I thought it was actually funny. And I thought ScarJo was great. And honestly, if we were really going full circle, for a second, because I knew you were going to ask about the fantasy, I almost thought about also mentioning Sam Rockwell, who I thought was really, really good in the movie. I thought the buffoonish kind of SS commander, like, he's actually really, really good at it. It's a good question. I think
the way he comes off is like, hey, I want to be on the front lines and I can't because of my eye injury. And then by the end of the movie, you're basically like, he's gay. And, if anyone were aware of that, then he would be in concentration camp also. it kind of layers the performance, and that's why he helped them at the end. And it's a whole thing because it starts off just like you said, it's a little cartoonish, but then it ends off really sweet, and then he sacrifices himself, and you don't see it coming. It's almost a Tarantino-esque change where the comic relief becomes the heart and soul in the end, and you're like, wait, what? Because Walton Goggins in Hateful Eight is comic relief, and then he gets the moment at the end of the movie.
Right. No, I was gonna say, funny enough, his portrayal of that, again, the buffoon SS command. I'm like, this reminds me. This is like either something a Coen movie or a Tarantino movie. I was like, it's one of those. I was like, this seems like it's right out of one of those two, and it was so. Just, I mean, it's stars align when the perfect casting and the perfect writing, and I'm like, this is. It was great. I thought the two of them, if I had to add an additional kind of substitute, it would have probably been Sam Rockwell, probably in for Tom Hanks, honestly, but because I thought he was great. But
shots
in any
fired.
case, yeah. I'm just saying, man, that man needs to step it up. I love you, Tom, but you can't. I mean, I love the Sullys and I love the Mr. Up, but you gotta give me something original. I love you, but give me something better than just playing these historical figures, because I feel like it's all Oscar bait. So with someone like, for example, Leo, I know we're getting a little off topic, but I just want to pull this out. Leo, funny enough, during the time when he was supposed to be developing as an actor, picked the perfect director to team up with, and that was Scorsese. That's not Tom's issue. Unfortunately, Tom, to your point, is kind of settled in, because when he's on the set, he's clearly the most powerful, biggest name on the set, and what do you do from there? Not even the producer, not even the studio goes against him. Leo was smart enough to realize, no, I'm on a Scorsese set. Scorsese, what he says goes. So I'm a student while I'm here, and I'm gonna go on with right, and it did wonders for his career, because we got to see the full range of who he could be. And so it's just interesting, because to your point, I was like, it's funny because there's certain actors that know what directors to get with at the right time, and I think Leo did it right. And then Tom Hanks, in theory, teamed up with the right guy with Steven Spielberg for 4 or 5 movies, but now you're kind of like, all right, what's the second act now? Or the third act in your case? Where are we at now, Tom? Because I'm not seeing it. So, yeah, interesting.
And what was your vote again for Best Supporting Actress?
So I'm going for ScarJo. That's my actual vote. But who I think is going to win, I think it's going to be Laura Dern. Again, just going off the gills.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Laura Dern, and I also voted for ScarJo. My heart broke when when he walked up to her shoes and after she'd been hanged.
Yeah, it was. She's great. I mean.
Yeah, I mean she's got chops.
Oh yeah.
And now for the most difficult category of these awards, and that's going to be Best Director. The nominees are Martin Scorsese for The Irishman, Todd Phillips for Joker, Sam Mendes for 1917, Quentin Tarantino for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Bong Joon-ho for Parasite.
Talking about a substitute, I would have obviously put in, never pronounced his name right, Jojo Rabbit, I'm sorry.
Taika Waititi.
Yeah, Waititi, that's it. I would put him in for Scorsese. Sorry, Marty, I love you, but I just got too many Casino vibes. Yeah, I probably would have put in Jojo Rabbit for The Irishman, because I just thought it was really, really good. I thought obviously what he did in that movie was special. But if I had to pick who I thought was going to win, I would personally pick Bong Joon-ho. But I think, again, going off of the guild, I don't ever take BAFTA into consideration, which I think happens this week, because naturally I think Sam Mendes is going to win that. I think Sam Mendes is going to win the Oscar, though, because he won the DGA. But I think the upset could be Bong Joon-ho.
I mean, other than Martin Scorsese winning, I don't have any of them as an upset.
I think Tarantino would be an upset. Todd Phillips would actually be the bigger upset to me, because it would be unwarranted, but you would kind of be like, well, I didn't see that coming. Not saying that he didn't deserve it. Not saying it wasn't a great, movie, but
that's almost like a Scorsese win.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, touche, it would be. But I think Bong Joon-ho would be an upset simply because I think the momentum's with Sam. He's won 2 of the last 3 guilds. I just think, with the exception of this SAG Award going to Parasite, but that doesn't bode for Best Director. That's more boding for Best Picture. I just think that he'd be the upset. He should be. I think he should win it, honestly. He's my pick. But I think Sam Mendes is going to end up winning it.
Yeah, so my vote would go to Tarantino. I thought that a lot of times when I'm looking at Best Director for my own personal sensibilities, it comes down to what were you expecting when you walked in the theater? What did you get, and what did this story dictate? And Scorsese eliminated on all points because I got exactly what I was expecting, and a little bit of more than I didn't want, which is the old De Niro kicking scene. If I'm watching that as a filmmaker, I'm like, I'm sorry, Robbie, I know what this scene is supposed to do. This absolutely doesn't work. And there's some fat in the Irishman that can be trimmed, so I don't know if that you're going to punish the editor or punish the director, but I can only punish the director here in this conversation. Todd Phillips is derivative of Scorsese. I was definitely impressed, but I wouldn't say that it was anything that he couldn't do again. They can make a joke or two and it'd be equal. You know, like the story might suffer, but the directing would be the same. Sam Mendes, oh my God. That visually the most stunning thing that I've seen, but I feel like that's a movie that comes together in editing because of the way that they chose to present it in the oneer. So much of it is tied to hiding cuts, and it is fucking beautiful the way they frame shots when they frame them, but because they can never kind of stop, then it just all bleeds together, and you know, there's like, you gotta have moments that stand out in a movie. And you know, when you're in your mind thinking about what was my favorite moment in 1917, there's like a couple that stand out, but it didn't rise to the level that I thought Tarantino did in terms of what he got out of what the story he was trying to tell. And then there's the movies within the movies and shows within the shows, and so many things you have to recreate, and so much stuff you're familiar with, and just the LA-ness of how he shot it. You know, it's like I felt like I was watching a Michael Mann movie with a different cinematographer. And Parasite is, I feel like that movie is performance. I kind of got some Ex Machina vibes from how they shot the house, and the contrast between the rich people's house and their like semi-basement in the I mean, I don't know, that the alley they lived in that flooded. It was terrifyingly awful. But again, I didn't feel like it necessarily needed my vote for directing. For film, now then you can bring 1917 and Parasite and Joker back in the conversation very easily. But for actual directing, my man Quentin gets my vote.
Okay. What I'll say about just my small recap. 1917 shocked me because I thought it was shot better than I thought it would be. And you know, like you said, you could pull out, you know, scenes that stood out. The scene though that left me kind of just like, wow, was the scene where they were shooting up the flares at night when he finally makes it to a coast, and they're shooting up the flares at night, and it's the Germans are trying to kind of see, you know, at night the landscape, and he's trying to hide. And the visuals of that scene alone, I was like, between the cinematographer and the director, that scene right there is magic. Like that is, every once in a while, you see a lot of movies, and you know, whatever, they all look. Every once in a while, you see a movie in a scene, or a scene in a movie where you're just like, wow, that was special. So like, there were a couple of movies, or scenes like that, so I can understand why Sam gets a nod. What I liked about Bong, go ahead.
The transition to that scene was kind of lazy with him just getting knocked out. Yeah,
I'll give you that. You're right, because he just kind of falls out. And it seems like it's the longest, 12, 13 hours that he had to go 6 miles. It seems like the longest 12 hours ever, because you're like, okay, what is the time lapse here? Is he up for an hour? He obviously has he's at least gotten 2 concussions in this trip. Like, what is happening right now? And, you know, so some of it's a little like, you know, but to your point, I just thought that some of that was special, and that's why they would give it. Now, with Moon, I was getting David Fincher vibes. I was getting Panic Room, Fight Club, like David Fincher vibe from that movie, like especially when the slow roll of the camera down into the cellar, and then the land, some of the shots of like those alleys, and then
everything is a portrait, right? Like everything, it's just so square and angular.
And so to that extent, that's why, you know what, I for an introduction, it's kind of, and I'm for us at least, I know we've done multiple films in Korea in the past, but for an introduction to U.S. audiences, I just thought it was really, really, it was so well shot. I almost, like, you can't ignore it. Like, yeah. So I mean, like, just in closing, I would say that the film, the director that I would vote for is Zoom, but I think that it's going to be Sam Mendes. Like, I just think because of, again, the momentum he's currently got, I think that his team is clearly much more adept at marketing this time around the year. He's won one before. And I just think that it's going to be him, but it would be great to get the upset. I would love for Parasite to get that upset.
Yeah, and I feel like I could watch like a documentary on the making of 1917 tomorrow and change my opinion. Maybe that's the magic of the movie.
Right, because I think Jun-Ho did a great job of turning that house into a character in itself and giving everybody their own enough screen time for you to get an idea of who each person is, and nobody was kind of scenery. And it's just, I thought it was great. And
then in the end, where the geography of the house actually matters in the ending, and we were all prepared for it as we moved through the house. We had a good idea of how to move through that house. You know, as people are running different directions or moving in from room to room or backyard and cellar, and we had a very good idea of the geography of the house, and that's all set up subliminally. We're like, you don't notice it happening.
Right.
Which is, that's the good thing.
The garage, how it leads into the cellar, the second entrance from the kitchen. I mean, it's just, it all kind of comes together in the end, and it makes sense why there's not a useless shot in the movie.
And finally, we've come to the end of the evening. The final award that we will be voting on. Best Picture. And your nominees are Ford v. Ferrari, The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, Little Women, Marriage Story, 1917, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and finally, Parasite. I do not have a fantasy book for this category because there's so many movies that, I mean, it's too easy. I feel like there's never, since they expanded to 10, everybody has a fantasy booking for a movie they would include in one. You know, there's always one extra that you could kind of clip, and this year is no different.
Yeah, I agree. Best Picture has become, I hate to say this without sounding derogatory, but it's kind of become a crapshoot when it comes to who's going to win or who should be in or who shouldn't, because again, it's all weighted and it's a rating system, and so you and I were talking about how that convolutes a lot of things because you can get a lot of people that, like we said, it's 1 through 10 or 1 through 9 in this case. A lot of people may vote the same 3, but have reservations about 1 and 2, and so those may end up all over the place, and you end up with a sleeper movie that ends up winning. So I don't know if I was a betting man, I'd hesitate, but I think just from what I'm seeing, SAG threw a wrench in it because I'm still going to say 1917 is my vote. Not my vote, I'm sorry. That's what I think will win. My vote is for Parasite, and I think SAG gave that last little boost of, Parasite could do it. But I just think 1917 has all of the components that the Academy just eats up. They just eat up that kind of scale. They eat up that type of narrative. It's not actually about World War II, so there's no implications as far as, I don't know, Holocaust or any of that other stuff that people tend to gravitate towards. So in their minds, they're going to see it as its own unique thing, even though you and I both know there's been a million movies just like it. And it actually does have a lot of the components that make sense for a Best Picture. If we're talking about totality, Best Picture-wise and everything, 1917, you're not 100% sure how it is going to end, but you have a general idea of how the end of it is going to be kind of sad, but something's going to get done that gives you some sense of closure. That happens. Parasite goes from being uncharacteristically from what you were expecting funny to being extremely dark. And it's a dramatic kind of, there's almost 2 scenes, literally it's like 2 scenes away from, this is so cool and funny, and they're getting away to, wait, what? And then the whole rest of the movie's changed. And it's like, in that respect, I'm like, that one gave me more edge of my seat, kind of what's going to happen. And then the ending of it is incredibly sad to me, just because of, how things kind of are left. To your point, if there was a second one.
Yeah, the trick of Parasite is that there's no antagonist and no protagonist.
Exactly.
It's a very nebulous story. Like, everyone has their good traits and their bad traits, and people are victims and then heroes and then villains in the space of 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this nice but nasty genre mashup, right? It's like a comedy thriller, and it's about class, but it's mounted into this ensemble cast that all play their part really well. So if you're talking, like I said, the Best Picture, I'm like, honestly, the components of the Best Picture, I don't see past Parasite in that respect. This is really why Crystal, my wife, was saying, if you were, just the way you're selling that, it sounds like you produced it. Like, it sounds like you were invested in that.
And there you go.
Yep.
I don't know if I ever said my vote, but I would vote for 1917. My personal again, sensibilities are, and this is where I may be the snob that was the problem in previous years, is that if I can watch it at home by myself or with my wife and enjoy it equally as I would if I saw it in the theater with an audience, I discount it a little bit. And I did see Parasite. Basically, there was, 4 people in the theater, and it didn't detract from the movie at all. It's so amazing that it was like, wow. But with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and 1917, those two were like theater experiences that I wouldn't have wanted to miss. And choosing between the two of them, I think I give the edge to 1917 because the sound editing is amazing. The cinematography is like next level. Like, it's fucking ridiculous. And some of the sequences, like including the run at the end, I'm just like, whoa. Like, you have to see this on a big screen because your home theater is not gonna get you there.
I agree. If I had seen that like as a screener kind of thing, I would have not have appreciated it, I think, as much. But being surrounded, and then obviously you can't help but look around you at times and see other people's reaction. And if they have the same reaction, you're like, okay, this is a good movie. Like, this.
Yeah, and I mean, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is one of my top 5 experiences of the whole year. But, unfortunately, the other experiences aren't necessarily Oscar movies other than 1917, because it'd be like Avengers Endgame.
Those are the combination of bigger than the sum of their parts, right? Like, as far as those all go. But and those are obvious, the tier points.
Yeah,
right?
and
Once Upon a Time for the shock value in some cases. And again, I feel bad because, like I said, I think Hollywood proper, I think they just see Tarantino as a really good writer that kind of can direct and is just kind of a quirky director, rather than seeing him as just like the full package. And I think that's why that takes away from him winning Best Director. But,
I mean, they should rewatch Inglourious Basterds then.
Hey, the foreign press are onto it. They get it. They're all about it. He's won what, 2-3 cons. The Palms he's won. I mean, he goes outside of this country, people get him. Like, he's immediately gotten it and he's understood. Here, it's hit or miss.
Yeah, I like the fact that he can make a movie that you have fun and there's still stakes. It's hard to kind of walk on both those lines. Like, it's not like you're going and it's pure popcorn fare, but you're still, in general, there will be something fun in every Tarantino movie.
Yeah, I agree.
And that will wrap it up for our Oscars talk. And if you were thinking that this was a waste of your time, remember, no one asked for this. And to just put the saddest bow on the podcast, and we put this at the end on purpose because, it kind of lets people just do the Oscar thing and enjoy it without having to come down in our realm of sadness. But today being the 27th, and it's the day after Kobe and his daughter and some of their associates were killed in a helicopter crash, there's no way that I couldn't share my thoughts in one form or another. And I know, Will, you also, had felt some type of way about Kobe. And if you want, go ahead and share your Kobe story.
Yeah, so my story is just going to be, for me at least, a general one, but just the fact that, when I heard the news yesterday, I think I went through all the stages that most of us went through. You go through 10 minutes of kind of not thinking it's true. Oh, no, that must not be true. And then you spend about 30 minutes kind of scouring the internet to see if it actually is true, because TMZ were the ones that broke it, which that's a whole other issue. I thought that was really distasteful because they did it before his family was even notified, which is just ridiculous. But in any case, you're kind of not sure what to think, and then as it becomes true and since then, it hurt me more than I thought it would, simply because I wasn't like a diehard Kobe fan, but I always liked him and I always appreciated him. And because of when he was drafted in my age, I'm in my early 30s, I felt like, and I've been a basketball fan my whole life, I felt like a part of my childhood was lost yesterday. And I think that's the only way I can describe it. Like, it felt like there's now a hole there. Granted, he'd already stopped playing, but that's not the point. The point is that, Michael has stopped playing, but we still kind of defer back to, Jordan this and Jordan that, and him being around gives us some of that closure. And we're not going to get that with Kobe anymore. And then, obviously, the way in which he left, I know that we've lost other stars. We've lost Michael Jackson. We lost Prince, and we've lost a couple other people. But this thing that shook me the most about it was the fact that all of those people had kind of self-destructive qualities or tendencies in their lives that facilitated it, so that at the end, while you still were upset, you kind of could understand it. This was just a tragedy, and I think that's what hurt me the most. I think that's what hurt all of us the most. And so I will. I'm just going to say that in general, it's a lot of hurt. He also was an Oscar winner, which so it's appropriate for the podcast. But I just want to say that I think we all lost something great, because his second act was going to be Hollywood, like proper, like really out in Hollywood, and there's a good chance we may have been talking about him in a couple of years for other movies he produced and this and that. We won't get that, so that is very sad. And I just want to send out my condolences, obviously, to his family and everything.
I feel you. I think it was so hard to process immediately. Very strange, because I was watching a bowling tournament, and I get a text from my brother, of all people, and he was like, "Did you hear about Kobe?" And my first reaction is, "Oh, he must have done something awesome." And I'm watching bowling, which, me being a PBA member makes me happy, and I was like, "Oh, good for Kobe something." And then the next text message is super sad, and then I'm like, "Wait, what?" And then the broadcast immediately breaks the news live, and I'm just like, I went from like, I was so happy. I at that moment of the day, it was really like one of my happiest moments. I just gotten from the gym, watching bowling, hanging out with my wife, nothing to do but relax, and then it's like your whole soul gets crushed. So that was difficult. And then just me being the same age as Kobe, I always felt like that was the best basketball player of my generation. It was always a race between him and Iverson, and he won. And part of that might be, people argue that Duncan is better, but again, Duncan came later. I was already into Kobe and watching him, and he had won the dunk contest and all those things. And I was a basketball player, like I was a pretty good player, and played high level ball. And it was like someone that you just are constantly chasing or emulating or bragging about being your age. Like, yeah, this is what we can do. Like, look out, adults and grown people and people on the edge of end of their story, like Michael Jordan. This is our generation coming to take over. So you kind of connected with them. And then my career ends, like my basketball career. And you kind of can still, after I played my last competitive game, Kobe was still winning championships. So I still felt like I had one foot in the game, because my guy was still representing for us. And when people were like LeBron or Kobe at that time, my heart told me LeBron will pass him, because I've seen this story before. My mind told me, but my heart was Kobe all day, every day. Because for those of us that can't play anymore, he's still out there doing it. And when he had his retirement tour that people were clowning on him for, my midlife crisis came when I realized I couldn't play competitive sports anymore, which is earlier than some other people's. But that's how people know me. If you talk to people that have known me from age 10 to 25, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, he's really good at basketball." That's how people know me. So I understand the process of retiring from something that's all people really give a shit about you for. And I reconnected with Kobe on that when he kind of did his end of the road thing. Just got healthy enough to play that last year, and hang him up on his terms and not have to go out because he literally couldn't physically do it anymore. And I just respected that. And I was like, cool. And then he goes on to the next chapter. And next thing you know, he's in film, which is another thing, what I went to school for. And it's just like everything Kobe and me, from our age to our passions to the whole thing, it always connected. He was doing what I always wanted to do and couldn't, because I just wasn't talented enough. I didn't have the right access or the right opportunities. And for all that to end so suddenly, I just wasn't ready. And I hold myself back from crying so often. Yesterday was all I could do. And I'm just a random guy that never met him. I'm sure this is 1,000 times worse for his family and his real friends. or people that actually, had a closer relationship with him anyway, even if it was just people that played against him. Because let me tell you, I'm still friends with some of the people I played with and against and on the court. That those bonds are real, and it's 1,000 times worse for them. I'm just a random dude, but the fact that it could affect me so much means that, man, he was here, he lived.
Yeah, I mean, and it's that thing where it does make you kind of rethink your own mortality, because you say to yourself, well, he can go, right? Like, it's like you feel like you're in the presence of greatness, obviously, when you talk about Kobe Bryant, and you kind of get to feel like, because he was such a public figure, that some of that may rub off, or you kind of get to share in that with him because you enjoyed it, and it brought special kind of, experiences and memories to you. And so you kind of share some of that. So when it goes like this, I think part of it is you can't help but feel like, damn, if he can go, and like that, then, the stuff that I'm holding on to or whatever little petty thing, you kind of feel like it's just irrelevant, because all the money, all the great equalizer's death, and it's so sad. And the thing about Kobe that always gets me is that, if you ever asked Kobe who the greatest Laker was, he'd always say Magic Johnson. If you ever asked Magic Johnson, he'd always say Kobe Bryant. It does make you rethink kind of yourself and your own mortality. So,
for sure, that fear when you might be losing someone you love, or you don't even know. I don't wish that on anybody. And so I the feeling that his family and friends are going through it, but you got to always remember that in an instant, anything and anyone. So just don't take the time for granted, and don't take the people you love or that love you for granted.
Agreed.
And I think it's important to talk about these kind of things. Like, I've had a lot of conversations over the past couple of days, but yesterday and today, but it would, and even this short conversation we had on the podcast, it helps, because we all have to process grief one sooner or later, and let's hope that it's a long time before we get anything this tragic in either our personal lives or, with people that we connect to in media.
You can look at it two ways. You can either, look at it and wallow in the negative side, which you can't help but do. But, there's also a good thing in that, I'm always going to say Kobe whenever I shoot something. Whenever I'm playing beer pong, or wherever I'm playing, doing something, whatever, I'm always going to say Kobe. Years from now, if I have kids, it is sad that I'm going to have to explain it to him to them what that means and who he was and what he did. But it's great that I'll have the opportunity to explain it to them, and hopefully my hope is that when I do it, they'll understand just from how I explain it to them how important, how big he was. So yeah, I forever young, unfortunately, but what is it? Heroes get remembered, but legends never die. So
well said, brother. And truly, we will now wrap up the podcast. Thank you again, Wil, for coming on.
Yeah, no problem, man. I appreciate you having me. This is a lot of fun. And it's also a good way for me to organize my thoughts, just a week or two out from the award, so that when I go into it, I'm better when I'm filling out my ballot. So appreciate that.
Let's hope that our vote would have counted on at least a couple of these.
Here's to hoping.
Thanks again. Take it easy.
All right. Bye, guys.
Long run out by Kobe Bryant. Behind. Oh! What did I just see? You just saw what Kobe does best, and that's bring people to their feet with a sensational play.